I've been making Game of Thrones videos for 4 years across 2 channels, and it just so happens that this is my 100th Game of Thrones video. So it's essentially fate to be ranking the 10 best episodes. For this ranking, I'll be evaluating every scene within an episode to determine its placement, and I'm looking for consistency between scene quality. Like, he may hold The Winds of Winter as one of the best episodes in the show given that it has the Great Sept explosion and a couple of other standout scenes, but personally, I think there's some bad scenes that weigh the episode down, along with some logical issues that I explored in my last Game of Thrones video. With that aside, let's get into the rankings. Number 10. The Wolf and the Lion. The perfect way to start the list with a classic breastplate stretcher line. It's so refreshing going back and watching a comedic scene like this after looking through so much of the cock-infested plague of comedy that is the later seasons. But here, you actually have playful banter between Ned making fun of his best friends and Robert wailing on his squire for fun. The jokes are way more creative, and Mark Addy, who plays Robert, has so much infectious charisma that makes the scene a joy to watch. Then this leads into the jousting tournament that features Clegane Bull. Seeing these two titans go at it is entrancing, and it's also so badass how Clegane both respects Robert by kneeling for him when called to, while simultaneously dodging the Mountain's attack. The sudden Mountain Clan ambush on Tyrion is cool and abrupt, and it's crazy how Tyrion killed someone with a shield. It's also very heroic that despite being a captive, Tyrion decides to make the decision of helping Catelyn rather than escaping. We have another meme with Bran.
A common saying, but not their official motto.
Theon and Ross's scene is alright. Arya is chasing after her lunch, and we get a big turning point of Varys revealing to Ned that Robert Baratheon is going to be killed. I love the subtle camera technique of pushing on each character's face, breaking the traditional static shot to convey the message that something drastic just happened. This scene significantly cranks up the conspiracy intrigue, and now the stakes are so much higher in King's Landing now that we have this information. It's also really neat detail seeing Varys and Illyrio discussing their plan about wanting to destabilize Westeros to make it an easier target for Daenerys. Then this is followed by Varys and Littlefinger. The battle of wits is so unique, and there's an active shifting power dynamic during their conversation as they reveal information about each other that the other doesn't think they know. I could listen to these two characters monologue at each other for hours. We get the classic impregnate line from Bronn, and another great small council discussion that is infused with the ethics of killing a baby to save the future of the kingdom, which sparks a heated argument that shows each character's perspective, doubling as character development and plot development. We meet crazy Aunt Lysa, and Tyrion is thrown into a sky cell. I've always loved the aesthetic of sky cells. That's actually what initially turned me onto the show as a fun fact. Sir Loras and Renly have a steamy scene, and initially I didn't care much for it, but this line makes me love it so much more.
The Targaryen girl will die?
Every time he talks about killing her, I swear the table rises 6 inches.
It's a shame he can't muster the same enthusiasm for his wife.
Robert and Cersei have a long conversation, and this isn't my top 25 moments for the show. I can go on for a while about it, but there's so much fascinating background exposed between these two characters, and it's so tragic how Cersei did love Robert, but Robert's lust towards Lyanna ruined it. After this, the episode ends with a climactic action scene between Jaime and Ned. So we have the Battle of Wits and the Battle of Swords, an overall great start on this list. Number 9. The Lion and the Rose. This episode is primarily here obviously because of the purple wedding sequence that takes up about half of the episode, but the rest of the scenes that came before it so range from good to okay. We are reintroduced to Ramsay in a haunting and dark scene of hunting an innocent girl through the woods. The fact that he's hunting her for the sole fact that she made Miranda jealous is insane. Tyrion and Jaime have a quick scene that's alright, and I especially love this funny and witty line.
Try the board. Cersei can't get enough of it since one killed Robert for her.
However, the scene does come across as slightly underwhelming because this is the first time they meet since season 1, and they don't really talk about much besides Jaime's lost hand. We have the start of Bronn and Jaime's iconic duo, and the banter between them feels so organic.
I still have my right hand. Plan on growing it back.
Theon shaving Ramsay's face while he tells him that Robb Stark is dead has a surprising amount of tension, and is a creative way to showcase Theon's loyalty to Ramsay. The wedding gift giving is fine, and Joffrey destroying Tyrion's gift with his sword was a definite highlight. Tyrion breaking Shay's heart is honestly really hard to watch given how much Tyrion has shafted Shay. It's like he has been slowly peeling off a band-aid since season 3, and this was the final pull. Bran being Bran, his scenes are never really that amazing nor are they terrible, and they are generally just middle-of-the-road quality. For the last scene before the purple wedding, there's a dinner with Melisandre, Stannis, and Selyse, and this is the one part of the episode I'd find myself skipping. There's not a lot of interesting backstory, and the whole conversation is imbued with awkward mom energy, but at least we get more Shireen. And finally, the Purple Wedding. This sequence is chocked full of so many small details and moments between numerous characters that it never feels boring at any moment. Small things like Mace getting wrecked by Elena, Podrick checking out the ladies, Elena yoinking the poison off of Sansa's necklace, Jaime big-dicking Loras, Cersei sussing Brienne, Oberyn and Tywin trading insults with smiles, Cersei being maniacal, Varys getting bonked. This scene has everything. There's so much depth and complexities happening within this space that it makes it feel so real. And all those praises aren't even including the bombastic finale of Joffrey's death. Easily one of the best in the show, and every character involved gives their best in terms of acting. Number 8. And now his watch has ended. I wasn't expecting this episode to be on the list, but after reviewing it, it has a lot of great scenes. It opens with Jaime essentially hitting rock bottom as he squirms around in the mud while he gets a pride beat out of him. This shot of Jaime traumatized with his severed hand on his neck is so grotesque, and it heavily contrasts Season 1 Jaime. I even treasured the moment after this where Bran calls out Jaime for being a coward for giving up so easily. Tyrion and Varys have another dialogue scene, and unlike others, we actually get concrete backstory for Varys. Since it's so rare that we get any, it makes the few scenes in which we learn about it that much more engaging and alluring. It also shows the dark side of Varys, and it's a shame that this is really the most evil Varys gets in the show, and he just becomes a good guy in comparison to the books. And of course, we get this banger of a line too.
Influence grows like a weed. I tended mine patiently, where I managed to wrap them around something very special.
Bran gets yeeted off a tree, Ross and Varys talk about Podrick's long rod, and we get a nice and wholesome scene between Cersei and Olenna talking about how much they love their children. Having this personal moment is a cool change of pace for Cersei, given that she's normally fighting almost everyone she's in a scene with. Then in the intellectual pairing of Olenna and Cersei is always fun to watch. Ramsay bamboozles Theon, and when Theon spills the beans, we get a very intimate moment with him, and how it was an utter mistake by betraying his true family. Funny contrast that we go from that to immediately getting tortured. Tywin talks to Cersei, and any Tywin scene is basically S tier. Political intrigue gets spiked with a fun pairing between Varys and Olenna. Their playful banter between each other shows their sharp wits, and seeing these two veterans scheme together is legendary. Sansa finally gets some hope in her life. The mutiny at Crosshair's Keep is insane, and the irony of Jorah Mormont dying in the most unhonorable way is delicious. The Hound roasting the Brotherhood never gets old, and something big finally happens in Daenerys' storyline. Throughout Season 2, she's mostly had a lackluster journey through Qarth, but now that she's actually acquiring power in a badass way, it makes her plotline infinitely more entertaining. Ironically, I think this is her most triumphant moment in her overall story, given her victories are a tad bit underwhelming, and we finally get the conqueror we've been waiting for. Number 7. Baelor. Similar to the line in The Rose, this episode is primarily here for the execution of Ned Stark. I do like this episode a bit more because there are two amazing precursor scenes. One of them being Jon's talk with Maester Aemon, in which it's revealed he's actually a Targaryen. It makes the advice he gives Jon have a lot of validity, given the amount of personal conflict Aemon went through when his family got wiped out by Robert's rebellion, but he couldn't do anything because he was sworn to the Night's Watch. And we get the love is the death of duty. Aemon Targaryen is a literal goat, and he steals so many scenes he's in. The other scene that I thoroughly enjoy is Tyrion, Shae, and Bronn bonding over Tyrion's game of guessing their past. That's actually a brilliant way to disguise character background exposition as natural dialogue, by making it a fun game, while also adding in the fact that Tyrion makes assumptions on character types. The twist that Shae goes against every trait that Tyrion assumes of her makes her so much more interesting, while Tyrion simultaneously gets rolled by her. I'd love these chill scenes where characters go on about their past, like Tyrion talking about Tysha and screwed up things Tywin has done to him. Some other noteworthy moments are the debate between importance of honor versus survival with Varys and Ned, showing how slimy and weird Walder Frey is, Jon getting Longclaw and celebrating with the boys, Ser Jorah defeating a Dothraki Bloodrider in single combat, and Robb Stark winning his first battle. The one hiccup in this episode is the cop-out of not showing the battle, but it's definitely understandable from a budget standpoint, and the fact that it wasn't entirely essential to the plot. It's just annoying that they built up to it so much and didn't give it proper payoff. Then, there's one other small scene left where the main character dies, nothing big or anything. The ramifications of this single event set the entire show into a blazing path of riveting storytelling. This moment is single-handedly one of the best twists in cinema, given how expertly it plays against the expectations of our main hero surviving every major obstacle. We are even led to believe for the last 2 episodes that no harm will come to Ned, but by going against that notion, it makes the twist even more shocking. And the execution of the scene is extremely visceral. The sound drowning out so we only hear Ned's breathing gives the moment a haunting layer of surrealism as we see our favorite character lose his head. Number 6. You win or you die. Goddamn, what an ending. The culmination of all the political intrigue brewing into a twisting hurricane of knives and backstabs in which Littlefinger betrays Ned was perfect. That iconic image of Littlefinger holding a knife to Ned's throat is burned into my mind as to what Game of Thrones is all about. We even have more top 25 moments within this episode given that we have the introductory scene with Tywin. What a badass man. I love how it isn't even required for him to be skinning a deer, but he just is. It shows off how resourceful he is, how he isn't afraid of getting his hands dirty, and it foreshadows him defeating the Baratheons given he's gutting their sigil. The efficiency of storytelling here is astounding because we both learn so much about Tywin while also learning nuggets of wisdom tied to the Lannister psyche. And this also isn't just a Tywin introduction, but it establishes his relationship with Jaime and how much value he places in his children. Keeping the fire hot after the start of the episode, this leads into Ned confronting Cersei about her having kids with Jaime. I love how she doesn't even deny it here and instead goes into a monologue about why she made all of those choices. It allows us to actually sympathize with the villain for once, along with having some killer dialogue. Littlefinger coaches some horrors from the sidelines, and this may not seem like an important scene, but we actually learn some motivation for Littlefinger's character. Theon harasses Osha, but gets rolled and smoked by Maester Luwin.
Thought she was our prisoner.
Are the two mutually exclusive in your experience?
Robert Baratheon dies, rests his beautiful and sexy soul. Even on his deathbed, Robert has more charisma than most of the characters in Season 8. The man is a living legend. He's over here coughing up blood while making funny jokes. Give us a Robert's Rebellion spinoff, you cowards. Ser Jorah ejects an imposter in a tense scene, and the boys become men. Ned Stark attempts playing the political game with Littlefinger and Renly, and it's fun rewatching this scene, because since Ned is honorable by refusing to back anyone but Stannis, the one true king, he ends up alienating any of his potential allies. Then, finally we have Khal Drogo being the coolest human being in the galaxy. I adore how much Jason Momoa is slaying it in this role. He's having the time of his life. Number 5. Fire and Blood. To me, this is the quintessential Game of Thrones episode. It's very well rounded in the sense that we get excellent scheming, betrayal, heartbreak, and triumphs amongst these riveting plot lines. I love the ending and how the writers perfectly align each of the main subplots in which they hit a similar thematic beat of heading into the unknown, of characters starting their own personal journeys. I love seeing the death of Ned Stark ripple throughout Westeros, and seeing each character deal with their own sorrow. I love the vile turn of Joffrey fully embracing his demon side and becoming a fully blossomed villain. I love the irony of the strongest warrior dying to an infection, which shatters our expectations. I love Varys and Littlefinger talking about their epic aspirations. Every scene is basically perfect. Even this small scene with Maester Pycelle talking about past scenes is engrossing as hell, and meme-worthy too. If this episode had a little bit more groundbreaking sauce in it, then it'd easily be within my top 3, but I can't really fault the episode that much given that Ned Stark died the episode prior. Number 4. Kissed by Fire. Exploding onto the scene with a trial by combat for the Hound, this episode immediately grabs your attention and excitement. The fight is adrenaline fueling. Each character is bashing through the environment, obliterating shields, and the Hound cuts through Beric's sword. And the twist of Beric coming back to life elevates the scene even higher by opening up a whole new magical avenue of resurrections. Jon Snow gets to the finish line with Ygritte and is essentially at his happiest. Roose Bolton has a maniacal, cute little moment with Jaime where he delays telling him whether or not Cersei got killed during the Blackwater. Olenna mops the floor with Tyrion in their first dialogue scene together, and it just makes me love her to death. The fact that she shows up and dances around one of the wittiest characters makes her a legend. Easily one of the best characters next to Tywin. Arya has a tragic moment with Gendry, where he makes a decision to stay with the Brotherhood. She's come to essentially love him, and is the last person she has left in terms of inner family. Then she has a conversation with Beric and Thoros, in which she learn more about resurrections. Also, this line from Arya is depressing.
Could you bring back a man without a head? Not 6 times. Just once.
The downfall of Robb Stark worsens through his trail of deteriorating decisions, and this episode has arguably one of the best dialogue scenes in the show, in which we get a monologue from Jaime talking about how he had to kill the Mad King to save King's Landing. Jaime sheds away his exterior armored shell, and our outlook of Jaime evolves into a more heroic knight. I also love how this revelation blurs the line of which oaths you should follow. And the acting here? Ooh, chef's kiss. This is the equivalent of Tyrion's trial scene, but for Jaime. After that masterpiece, we then get one of the most heartwarming scenes with Davos and Shireen hanging out in the dungeon as she teaches him how to read. That beautiful look he gives her makes my heart flutter. Grey Worm establishes he respects and is devoted to Daenerys in an uplifting scene that confirms her army isn't just a drone of mindless killers. Littlefinger is still oozing wisdom as always, and the episode ends in an explosive family conversation between Cersei, Tyrion, and Tywin. The fact that he demolishes his own children makes him even more of a savage. Tyrion and Cersei have essentially had impunity for the last couple of seasons, and are finally put into place by this absolute Sigma Chad. Number 3. The Reigns of Castamere. Yeah, you know why this episode is here. The Red Wedding is easily the best scene in Game of Thrones due to how shocking and brutal the twist was. George the Mad Lad Martin got away with killing 2 main characters. The whole aura of this scene exudes a feeling that something feels off due to the fact that it's so elongated. There's also a lot of signs leading up to the betrayal that rewards viewers who really pay attention, like Roose refusing to drink wine, the phrase casually locking the doors, and the musicians playing the Reigns of Castamere. God, just the execution is perfect. From the acting, the brute force change in pace, and the grotesque violence that shatters our feelings and makes us shower tears for the characters we loved. And now, the question is, does the rest of the episode have the consistency to call the overall package outstanding? The answer is a definite yes. Robb Stark making amends to Walder Frey has a lot of tension, and we are curious about whether or not he's holding a grudge. Which you kind of drop that suspicion once they commit to marrying Edmure Tully, and then they kill everyone. Any scene with the Hound and Arya is pog, and in this episode there's 2 of them. Bran works into Hodor for the first time to stop him from shouting, which is cool, and Jon Snow finally changes sides when he's asked to kill an innocent man. The action here feels a bit unrealistic though, given that Jon has to fight a 1v3 or 4 against the Wildlings. It falls into the action trope of fighting one person at a time to mask the fact that it's impossible to fight a group at once, and to get around that, they cut to Tormund wrestling Ygritte and also cut over to Bran. The direwolves do help, but that isn't until later on. And this is only a very small issue. The battle for Yunkai does a much better job at showcasing fighting a group of enemies given that Grey Worm, Ser Jorah, and Daario are all back to back. All in all though, the Reigns of Castamere is basically filled in with good scenes while having a perfect final sequence. Number 2. Blackwater. Now we're getting to the episodes that are a complete banger through and through. The battle sequence is the main draw here, but even the dialogue scenes leading up to the battle are amazing. We have great conversations like Davos contrasting Mathos' blind loyalty and cockiness with his pragmatic view of the difficulty of cracking King's Landing. Varys telling Tyrion about how much he hates magic, and we have Bronn's funny humor.
I saw you kill a man with a shield. You'll be unstoppable with an axe.
Then for scenes that aren't driven by dialogue, like Bronn and the Hound's standoff, they are so engaging because of how much they raise the tension in an already stressful environment. George R. R. Martin does a magnificent job of stacking up conflict to make the upcoming obstacle of Stannis seem even more daunting, like everyone being scared, fighting between soldiers, Joffrey abandoning everyone, and people dropping equipment. That's why it's so relieving and cathartic when Tyrion explodes the Blackwater with wildfire. And visually, this is the first time in the show where you're actually awestruck. The show's ambition of massive battles is a reality now, and this explosion drastically raises your hype for the upcoming attack. For the cinematography and action, it's all coherent and you can actually see what's happening on screen, unlike in Season 8. But for the Blackwater, we have a perfect mix of wide shots to give us a bearing of space, and medium shots to quickly cut between people fighting. Not only is this battle just straight action, but there's a lot of character moments like the Hound getting traumatized by fire and snapping at the king, and Tyrion's epic speech. And speaking of Tyrion, this is basically his peak, and I love how happy he feels when everyone is cheering his name after leading a successful counterattack. One of the main reasons why I wouldn't put this as number 1 is that I think Cersei's drunken dialogue scenes grind the pace to a halt during the battle. It makes you want to skip over them despite those scenes not actually being bad. It's cool seeing a drunken Cersei essentially letting loose about how much she hates everything and everyone. Lana Headey seems like she's having a great time in the role, and maybe they should have cut one of the 3 Cersei scenes, but it's alright. And obviously the ending is great because it has Tywin saving the day. No bias here. Number 1. The Watchers on the Wall. I think this is both one of the most rewatchable episodes, along with each and every scene being a 9 to a 10 out of 10. This overall episode is very similar to Blackwater, but to me, I like the bigger scale of the battle. The higher budget led to some more dynamic cinematography like long takes tracking all around Castle Black, more grand VFX, and more ambitious action. Another difference is that we have character duels like Tormund vs Sir Alliser and Jon vs Styr. It shakes up the action conflict of just mowing down extras, which can become repetitive after a while, and instead gives us a personal 1v1 of 2 opposing characters of similar skill, leading to an engaging fight. And I also love how there's so many cool moments stitched throughout the battle, like a giant riding a mammoth, dropping a scythe on people climbing the wall, a giant shooting an arrow and impaling someone, and the boys coming together in harmony as they chant their vows to breed courage in the face of a charging giant. This battle is flat out perfection, and even the dialogue scenes before it don't let up. The awkward talk of Jon telling Sam about love is cute, Aemon talking about past love is pure joy that gives us a beautiful moment of intimacy, where living in past memories can suppress the oncoming doom. And Sir Alliser giving Jon great advice about second guessing yourself as a leader can be detrimental, and Jon actually uses that advice later on in season 7 and 8. Every character has a moment to shine in this episode, and it feels perfectly balanced. Jon finally gets his much deserved role of leadership, and he feels like a complete badass once he enters the fight. Sam also becomes a man, and he channels his Chad energy for once by choosing to protect the boys over hanging out with Gilly. And finally, the ending. The death of Ygritte is heartbreaking, and I adore how Jon is able to have a warm final moment with her, while we are swept away by the gorgeous cinematography. The Watchers on the Wall easily deserves my top spot. Thank you guys for watching, and for the next ranking in the future, I'll most likely do the top 10 worst Game of Thrones episodes. Let me know in the comments what your top 10 would be.